Hello.
I, I made the mistake of talking about AI art again. The same thing happens every time.
No, you're good. Question. Chat GPT. Speaking of AI art, what are your thoughts on that one?
What is that?
Do you not know it?
I I know about
GPT?
chat.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's the new AI text
Is it a chat
creator.
bot or does it make like writing
Chat.
prompts?
It's a chatbot that can do basically anything.
I think these things are fun as novelties, like in their own category. The problem that I have is when they start threatening like actual art or actual like production or communication. So I don't mind chatbots. I would mind it if something that already exists starts happening. When you have like online help services that are supposed to give you a text like window with a real human and then a bot answers. Like that's what these idiots in chat don't understand they're pushing for. An entire world where every time you like want tech support, um and you open up a text like a chat a help chat on like a website, you don't know whether a human is on the other side or not, or if like increasingly as text like chatbots get better and better, they get better and better at like fooling people who are like, "Are you really a bot?" And then the bot like responds, "No, I'm not. Don't be silly. Haha, how can I help you?" But you're not really talking to a human. Um, yeah. So if it's in its own category, if it's a distinct, recognizable like AI thing, I'm fine with it. But if it starts muscling in on what's supposed to be actual human communicative behavior, that's where I take issue.
It's muscling in, yes.
Yeah.
But imagine you can delve into that later and figure it out more.
There are people in chat who are defending the bot thing right now. Holy shit. If you guys had a tech problem that could be solved with a bot, you could have solved it through a fucking website Q&A. What tech problems are you having that you need to go to a website, then a text chatbot for that couldn't have been solved by thumbing through the manual? Every time I've ever gone to a company for help in one of their products, it's because of some insane niche thing that I need to spend 7 hours talking to bots before I can get to a human who can almost instantly solve it because they're a human being. I have no idea what you guys are up to. Oh my god, I'm sorry. We only have an hour for the talk. I'm being super selfish. Hit me up. What's your name?
Okay. Hello. My name is Zach Littlejohn. I'll give the quick one. So I'm an anthro student at Hamilton College. In the past, I've worked on political rhetoric and contemporary medium, and I'm currently working on my undergrad thesis, which is an examination of the online left. So that is looking at the online left as a distinct community with various internal structures and groups and subgroups. And for this project, what I'm doing is I'm identifying the various subgroups and communities, their ideology, values, their rhetoric, their goals, and how all those elements influence perception and interaction with other subgroups, and how that overall structures the community and influences its function and its goals. So you, as a content creator within this overall community, are both a bit of a representative as well as an influencer for a certain subsect of it. And because of that, your values, rhetoric, how you interact, how you perceive other people, other groups, all that kind of stuff is essentially a piece of the overall puzzle. So that is what this project is looking at. Real quick, do I have your permission to record this?
Yeah, go for it. I mean, we're live on my end, so it already is being recorded.
Yeah, that's for legal requirements.
There you go.
Okay, so before we get started, do you have any questions for me?
No, not at all.
Okay. So I have several base questions and then some more specific questions. However, they overlap. You answer one or the other, it doesn't matter. So let's kind of move forward. So beginning off very simple, how would you describe your political ideology?
Libertarian socialist.
Okay. And then what would you say some of the most important values of this ideology?
Well, I would say it's principally about human freedom. The idea would be that you use uh, democratic political superstructures as a way of ensuring that people have the greatest amount of control over the systems they live in, as long as that control doesn't allow them the ability to hurt other people.
Okay. There's going to be a bit of jumping from topic to topic, so only because we're doing the bridge version here. So then moving along to your platform, what was the motivation behind creating your platform and producing the content that you do?
Well, I think live streaming is a lot of fun. I initially got into it more of as a curiosity after graduating from university. It's entertaining. It's obviously very profitable. Of course. And that always helps when you're trying to find a career. And I believe very much in the message that I spread, even when I'm arguing fervently with my community. So I would say that is about as fulfilling as a as a job can reasonably get.
Mhm. So then, with your platform, what are your goals for it? What do you hope to achieve by producing this content that you do?
I'll move people over to my way of thinking and my positions, or at the very least to make them more sympathetic to those positions. Um, Additionally, I do like it when numbers go up. However many viewers I have, subscribers, donations, those are always nice going up. I don't see any harm in them going up, at least not past a ridiculous point. Doing as well as I can in that field while being authentic to my values and allowing myself to express I guess my idiosyncrasies without any issue. There are people much more capable of treating this like a business, but I don't, and I have more fun that way.
Okay, so then actually with that, I'll take a slight turn and discuss a bit about the platform you use, the medium which is streaming. So in previous interviews that I've done, as well as kind of observing general discourse, I've noticed a trend or pattern that streamers in general often receive quite a lot of criticism, whether it's saying they're grifters, that they are desire only gossip or drama, or the kind of, it's more kind of a personality for politics. Um, with Garden's criticisms, do you suppose that this is that why do you suppose that this particular medium streamers tend to receive this type of criticism?
Well, it's ubiquitously the case. If in the age of the internet, if somebody wants to know something, all they have to do is search it. All the information in the world is available to us, with the exception of some really niche stuff. The job of content creators, especially people who do politics, is not to deliver that information in and of itself, because again, they could find it if they wanted to. It's about how you deliver that info. If you make it interesting or fun, you can deliver information in ways that people wouldn't otherwise really like care to listen to. That's the whole point of like news broadcasts, for example. Traditional news stations like CNN or MSNBC try to keep people hooked in on them watching the news with, charismatic broadcasters and big fancy graphics and intelligent structuring of the stories they deliver. For content creators online, including myself, it can often be more about style or humor or whatever. But the personality is a selling point no matter what. The only way to get personality free information is, I mean, even to an extent, the writing of a Wikipedia article conveys some intent on the part of the person who wrote it. But if you want, you can do independent research. I think people come here for the personality primarily. The question is, how responsibly does the content creator use that?
Mm. And would you say that for streamers, the personality plays a slightly different, bigger role, or perhaps a different role than, say, video essayists?
Oh, it definitely, I think it's amplified here because of the parasociality. Since a live streamer can directly interact with their community in chat while they live stream, there's the ability to reach them, which was never the case before with even regular YouTube video makers, but also people who do television shows or anchor broadcasts. The only way to involve yourself personally in a live broadcast before would be to show up at a news station and start throwing rocks at the windows inside the production set, which they don't appreciate. So this is definitely easier.
So, with that, do you suppose that there are any problems specific to this medium because of that fact, because of that dynamic between the creator and the audience?
Well, yeah, it's an exacerbation of existing trends. So I think that every criticism you can make of live streaming here would apply to some extent to other kinds of media, but it is an issue. Parasociality can, there are sort of mentally or socially weak people who can, uh, kind of be lured in by live streamers. There's a greater potential for abuse there. But that is, I think that's not really necessarily unique to the medium. It's just something that can be a bit more visible when you're dealing with live interpersonal contact between content creator and viewer. Obviously, people have to be responsible with that. It can also, blow back and do more damage to the content creator as well. Live streaming is generally a very easy job, I think, but in some specific and very unique to the medium ways, it is very difficult. So people have to be careful with that too.
So then, continuing on with the criticisms, we're going to move on to more specifically you, uh, because you are a common target of them, for a variety of reasons. So then, first off, why do you believe that you are the target of so much criticism so often? And in general, what are your feelings about it? Of
Criticism? Me? I have no idea what you mean.
course,
Uh,
we're
you mean just for being a live streamer or for me being me?
going to go for you being you, whether that is your politics, your personality, your platform.
Um, well, at the risk of, lip balm ram out. At the risk of, jerking myself off so hard that I break my arm, I'm not very group thinky, in the sense that and this is just a good business strategy, by the way. I'm not knocking people who do this necessarily, but I'm not very good at holding my tongue and not getting into fights because it would be sort of politically expedient to me to avoid doing that. So I've gotten into plenty of arguments with the rest of the online left. The biggest departure that I had with the rest of the online left in a lot of ways was me insisting that we continue to support Joe Biden after Bernie Sanders dropped out of the 2020 Democratic primaries. A
Mm.
decision which was as close as you can get objectively correct, for achieving or left leaning goals, or at least preventing further right leaning goals from being accomplished. But unfortunately, not everyone saw eye to eye with me. I'm also a generally combative person. I also think that the online left has kind of an aesthetic bias towards certain types of content production, and because I'm sort of like a loud, big, aggressive guy, that I fit outside of that range, which makes me more appealing to some people who would otherwise feel ostracized from the left. But I think it makes some people uncomfortable. Oftentimes, when people criticize me, I feel like they're criticizing a kind of imagined version of me that has no relation to what I actually say or do or act like. But it's constructed from kind of an image of me they might have, that they might be more inclined to be uncharitable towards.
And what image of you is that?
Oh, just as like a big, angry, like misogynist gamer debate bro guy, right? Even if you take a lot of these terms in isolation, outside of misogynist, which is a bad thing to be, you say something like gamer or debate bro or like a big guy. There are connotations there. A lot of online left leaning political messaging is very aesthetically geared towards people who are already left leaning. A good example of this might be the fact that there are so many left leaning content creators who are like trans or otherwise queer people with soft, like bisexual lighting behind them, who use academic progressive terminology to discuss ideas that, let's be real, 95% of Americans don't have much of an interest in or know very much about. There's nothing wrong with those types of videos, by the way. I've enjoyed tons of them. But it doesn't do much to reach outside the aisle. And I think that so much of the discomfort towards me is a discomfort really with diversity of tactics. The idea that behaving in different ways, trying to reach different audiences, hit different aesthetic keynotes can be a good way of reaching people who might otherwise kind of block you together and not listen to you.
So then, mhm. So then, if you deviate from other people in terms of who they're trying to reach, what they are trying to say, who are the groups that you are trying to reach that they may be neglecting?
Well, I think the big weakness of the left, strategically over the past decade, I think, has been the idea that we're all fuddy-duddies. We're not capable of having fun. We're very morally Puritan. We'll call people out. We'll hold people to account. We're obsessed with constant internal critique. To an extent, these things are true, though not as much as people say. I think it's an issue within the left, but there's still certainly plenty of ways to be a leftist and still be like irreverent or jokey, non-dogmatic, silly. One of the big advantages that the right has had over the past decade, at least online, is the idea that being conservative means freedom. You can make whatever jokes you want, and you will not be criticized for it. You do not have to improve as a person. That's kind of the selling point, right? Like, imagine you're a 14-year-old white boy in high school. I was once one of those. And you imagine some kind of personification of left and right messaging who each try to pull you in. And this kind of does happen online for a lot of young people. And for the right, it's just like, haha, look how epic we are. Look how edgy we are, owning these people. Aren't we smart? Aren't we cool? Aren't we funny? These, self-aggrand or like self-congratulatory motifs are really appealing to a lot of people who have insecurity issues. And then the left is all like, oh, there are so many problematic things you do, so many trends you contribute to. You're going to have to completely rebuild yourself. You're going to have to critique this, check your privilege, check that, and maybe you can be a good person. You have a lot to atone for. I don't think that's completely accurate for how the left behaves, but fuck, it feels like it sometimes. I think it's important to show that you can be kind of funny and irreverent, edgy, maybe a little problematic, and still be a left-leaning person, to still be a good person. And if you can show people that, I think you can show them that the left isn't a monolith and that there's value in listening to the ideas because they won't come at the cost of like total self-deprecation or like neutering, you know?
Mhm. So then, lighthearted, edgy, kind of not sacrificing fun, as you say, to what ends? What are your overall goals? What do you hope to achieve by having this personality, this persona, this platform, and bringing people over to the left?
Well, I don't hope to achieve anything by acting that way. That's just the way that I act. I did that before I streamed. It hasn't really changed. I just think that people like me tend to be kind of like on the periphery of the left, or we tend to move right, because we don't like being constantly criticized for behaviors that are aesthetically problematic, but not substantively so. Um, but my hope is that if I can do this and be successful doing this, which clearly I am, at least to some extent, I can show there's a broader market, a broader audience. I just think that people will move towards ideologies and communities where they feel comfortable being themselves, and where they have a good time. Nobody wants to be a part of an ideology that means they'll be unhappy. That doesn't that's not a good hook under any circumstances, not even for political ideology. People don't make political choices based on some kind of like pure ethical evaluation of the world they live in. We're afflicted by a number of biases, and a lot of those will be biases of convenience. We will be more likely to favor ideologies that benefit us to begin with. It's one of the reasons why wealthy people are more likely to be in favor of stuff like austerity, lower taxes on businesses. It's not all just like, conniving Machiavellian internal politicking. A lot of them legitimately believe, now that they are wealthy and thus are exposed to information that is, in their cultural circle, they legitimately move towards those ideologies. It helps that they're to their benefit. Likewise, if it can be to the benefit of people to, move over to the left, which it certainly will seem so if they're not, kicked out for being kind of edgy, then they're more likely to move that way. And that's what I want to go for.
So then, um, real quickly finishing up this discussion of kind of criticisms, and then you can move on to another part. Any of these critiques against you, do you believe they may have merit, or they may be coming from a genuinely earnest place?
Oh, sure. I think I get a lot of bad faith criticism that I genuinely think is worth discarding. Like it's constructed either maliciously or off an image of me that just is not reality. But of course, I'm not perfect. There are plenty of legitimate criticisms. But it's worth noting that that question that you've asked me, or I guess the attitudes that lead towards people asking that themselves outside an interview format, is one of the things I'm talking about, right? People on the right don't really do this, like content creators on the right don't have this rigorous, like, well, you've listened to all this criticism and what do you think you can change about yourself and how do people still bicker within the right, but there's not an expectation of continuous self-improvement to an imagined ideal. Self-improvement is good. Don't get me wrong. We should listen to valid criticism, but past a certain point, when you receive a level of criticism that is unhelpful, unwarranted, or inaccurate, which I think I do, it becomes detrimental. It becomes more about like purity testing. So a lot of the criticism that I get, it's valid and appreciated. But I do think we should be careful about trying to push purity too far, because no human can hold up to a certain level of scrutiny. It's different level for every human, of course, but there is a limit for everyone. Nobody behaves perfectly ethically at all times, and if we're chasing people down that road too far, then it doesn't actually achieve anything outside of foster infighting and division.
Mm-hmm. Um, okay, so then another quick shift, another turn in topics. This is kind of getting on a little bit of what we discussed for some infighting for some dogmatism within the left, as well as how you present yourself rhetorically and strategically. So, who do you identify as your ideological or strategic partners within the online left? That is, content creators, either ones you know personally or do not, or perhaps ideological communities who you feel you're allied with in pursuit of shared goals, or you have shared values, or who you feel are, you might disagree with a number of topics, but you feel like you are, essentially comrades, for lack of a better word.
Well, there are plenty of people who push in the same direction as me. Interpersonally, I get along with very few people for a variety of reasons. I always feel bad answering questions like these because I have a terrible memory and I'm afflicted by recency bias. When I think of people who I get along with, my two thoughts are Xanderhall and Demon Mama because both of them showed up in my chat this stream. I have a really bad memory. There are a lot of people who I get along with, at least relative to what I'm capable of remembering at any point in time. When asked on the spot, I'll just refer to the last people that I talked to. Um, there are plenty of people who I'm not directly friends with, though, who push in the same direction. Especially because I think the most important direction to push in right now is anti-fascism, which means that more and more so, like my talking points, it feels are getting more popular within the liberal left. Of course, that's not them pulling from me. I just mean that if the broader position is one of anti-fascism, this is something that a greater number of people can agree upon than if it were radical gender politics or communism or whatever.
Mm. So then, would you be able to identify a certain um, ideological community or sub-community within the online left that you might feel aligned with in terms of your anti-fascist goals, or in terms of your kind of radicalization, bringing people more left? Either people who are doing the same thing, and pursuing the same goals, or who are part of some one of those processes. For example, liberals, anarchists, Marxists, Leninists, so forth.
Well, definitely not Marxist Leninists. That's for sure.
That's the next question.
Most of anarchist Twitter is fine, but anarchists are very culturally weak, with no exposure. Basically, if people were to accept me as an anarchist, which is not the easiest pill for some people to swallow, I think, then I would be the largest anarchist content creator, possibly in the English-speaking world, possibly in the world. The anarchists just aren't very numerous, I think. Um,
Mm.
Outside of that, um, I mean, Breadtube is fine. I try to think of the internet less and less as a kind of set of communities because I don't think that's worked out very well for Breadtube, We still don't really have a like collectively agreed upon term for the online left space. Breadtube doesn't seem very applicable anymore because, Sean and Contra don't really make videos that much, certainly not Contra. Lindsay
Mm.
Ellis left YouTube. H-Bomb makes videos on the Minecraft Roblox oof noise. A philosophy tube still kicking, Abigail's still kicking, but even then, it feels like everyone's kind of there's more value, I think, in thinking of people's individual spaces and then kind of like collective adjacent bubbles of shared interest. In terms of anti-fascism, pretty much everyone left of center is going to be on board with this. I think even most like boilerplate MSNBC liberals are on board with referring to the GOP as fascist these days. So it's very nice to see that messaging spread. I wish it would spread more and faster, but you know, we try to get what we can.
So then, actually, with that point you made on BreadTube, when you say BreadTube, what do you mean? How are you defining it?
Well, that's the problem. Nobody knows. Look, functionally, when people said BreadTube, I think they referred to like a collection of maybe a dozen YouTubers who make
Mm.
video essays about being gay or about being trans or whatever. And that's BreadTube. Um, of course, the reason that term kicked off to begin with is because it was meant to idealize a sort of YouTube culture pushback from what was previously a very right-wing space. Back in 2017, when the major breadtubers really started posting and growing, it was the first time we'd seen like a pushback against what was previously like a Gamergate infested shit hell hub. Um, but since then, the term has lost a lot of meaning. I find
Mhm.
functionally, the most prominent left-leaning content creators aren't people who talk politics exclusively. They are people who will talk about culture issues, pop culture stuff, human interest topics, with a left-leaning spin. I always use this guy as an example, Curtis Connor. He's a TikToker, YouTuber, huge content creator. Progressive bent to his videos, but he doesn't exclusively talk politics. In fact, he doesn't really talk politics, not directly. He won't talk about feminism. He'll talk about weird guys on TikTok being kind of weird about women, like he won't talk about like the incel movement. He'll talk about, what is with people in this dating advice. It's a way of delivering the idea, the message, without alienating people by directly codifying your politics. I think that's a very smart way of getting people introduced to your ideology. It's not on the table for me, of course. I'm very explicit and I'll never change in that respect, but I'm glad other people are doing it. It's good. It's diversity of tactics.
So then, okay, do you believe that Breadtube is then serves a purpose of introduction to the left through discussion of social issues?
At this
Or is
point,
it
I don't think it serves any purpose, the term. I think it's
okay?
purely vestigial.
Okay. And I imagine you now, this is a funny little fact, you are included in the Wikipedia page for Breadtube.
Yeah, which is kind of weird because I had the least in common with the rest of the people there. I'm a left-leaning content creator, sure, but a lot of what defined Breadtube, as opposed to the much broader and much less used LeftTube, was the whole video essay, queer, soft child, post-Tumblr aesthetic, which I don't have, I mean, I have colored lighting behind me, but apart from that, I don't really hit any of those points, I guess, except for being left-leaning. I don't mind being included in the block because I think it's kind of funny to see people argue over my inclusion. If it's worth anything, the moderators over on the Breadtube subreddit have long since banned my videos from being posted there because it caused too much fighting. So whatever that might mean, taxonomically, there you go.
Mm. They use not amazing picture for you either on Wikipedia.
Wait, the Wikipedia picture of me looks fantastic. Are you kidding me? Where I'm in the tank top?
I've said too much.
I chose that picture myself. The Wikipedia editor emailed me and they were like, "Hey, do you have a nice picture of yourself to use?" Which of course I don't. So I just went to a recent stream VOD and screenshotted this so the chat wasn't visible and gave them that.
Nice. Yes.
Sun's out, guns out. Also, you can just tell looking at this image that I really just don't aesthetically fit in with the Breadtube label at all.
So it's conscious then.
Well, I'm not that. I'm not a soft boy. I'm not a trans chick. I mean, I have bi lighting behind me, I guess, though it's more blue than pink. But no, it's just I'm just too edgy for the crowd. The thing that really bothers me, I'll use an example. I'll call someone out directly, someone who doesn't even like me. So it's drama, okay? Abigail Thorne, Philosophy Tube videos, are they good? Yes. Kill James Bond podcast, is it good? Yes, I've watched every episode. But
Yeah.
Abigail Thorne, soft girl, doesn't seem to like me, whatever you do, beloved by a lot of breadtubers, whatever. Edgy girl in her podcasts. And they'll be edgier during the Patreon only episodes, which, because I like the podcast, I've seen. And when I listen to that, like all these leftists who are in with the more sensitive Breadtube community, but are still edgy on their own time, I think, with respect, you motherfuckers, what the fuck? What? Okay, yeah, I know you're all like that. I'm like that too. Don't get mad at me for doing, what the fuck? This has happened to multiple people in the Breadtube space. And, I know things that not everyone knows because, I'm a larger content creator, so I hear this or that. But the whole, being lightly edgy, irreverent, you cannot survive being a leftist on YouTube without having a dark heart of comedy. Contra's edgy. I swear to God. I don't know if it's because I'm a guy or because I'm less tactful than they are, which I am, to be fair. But At the end of the day, humans are irreverent and edgy. And I don't know. I think lefties may have shot themselves in the foot a little bit by kind of like sanitizing their public facing content of that because it makes them seem a little bit inhuman. Like here's an example, right? I'll say this. It is a human thing to see hot people in public and think in your head like zooey mama. That's what you think in your head, you know. That's
Of
not
course, yeah.
a now aesthetically looking at a hot person and like staring at them for a second. This is a culturally associated behavior, and we associate it with lecherous men. That's what we think of. When you think of like a hot person is being stared at in public for just like a sec, not leering for like a minute or whatever, but like briefly, like, oh wow, they're hot, you know. This is something we associate with lecherous men. In reality, literally everyone does this. Straight or gay,
Mhm.
men or women. If you are capable of visually appreciating how humans look, then you will do this. Um, and if you, in the same way, like I think it's very normal and very human for people to have kind of like that attitude when they talk about things, especially off the cuff or when they're being comedic, an acknowledgement of interest in others, a casual recognition of your ability to appreciate attractive people. It's just a normal human thing, you know? And there are ways to do that without being creepy. I think people do it all the time. I think it's very normal to do that without being creepy. But have you ever gotten a feeling when watching a content creator that there's a degree of sexlessness that doesn't feel authentic, but rather feels like an imposed and like strictly regulated imposition as a way of not trying to come off that way? I might be being a bit vague here. Have you ever gotten a feeling it's kind of like the faking being nice thing you might pick up from some people, or sometimes people will accuse male feminists of faking being nice to women when in reality in their head they're doing it for the nice guy points. Have you ever you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Yes, I believe it depends though,
It
because
depends
honestly,
hugely, massively so, and it's super, super subjective too. A lot of people might
you-
disagree on where like the line is. The only point I'm trying to get, and I'll wrap this up because I'm rambling. The only point I'm trying to get is that little idiosyncrasies, little bits of human behavior that indicate our flaws or our interests, they're human, and that's one of the
Mhm.
reasons that I don't like purity testing tendencies in the online left, because sometimes I get the feeling that people are trying so hard to be like, very straight laced, like perfectly unproblematic at all times, that not only is it inauthentic, but it's setting a standard no one else can meet, and therefore laying the groundwork for like interminable critique and infighting. Does that make any sense?
yes, I hear you.
Okay, okay. Sorry for rambling, but yeah, that's. I just wish we could all be a bit more forthcoming about the fact that we're trying our best, but there doesn't need to be that standard because nobody can meet it anyway.
No, we'll get to that too in a minute. And also, when it comes to rambling, the beauty of anthropology is that it's all gold. You can talk, you can ramble on, and it's all pure gold right there. Facts and logic are relevant. Okay, so then, kind of getting on with what you just mentioned. On the other hand, who are some communities and people? This is both creators and then their communities as well as ideological communities who you are antagonistic with or who are antagonistic with you, who you are opposed to. There's some degree of conflict or friction between you guys. Who are some of these communities or people?
I think on the left, almost everyone. I think at least at the very least on Reddit, almost every left-leaning subreddit has either banned me or will auto ban people who like me.
Mhm.
Um, most video essayists on the left. So the right is a given. Obviously, the right doesn't like me because I'm left leaning. Any people associated with the Marxist Leninist Maoist or Marxist Leninist groups or with Stalinists online doesn't like me because they're all not respectfully red fascists and they don't like the fact that I think that progressivism and democracy are necessary components of socialism. The anarchists
Mhm.
tend not to like me because they're all like extremely overeducated anxiety cases who can't order pizza over the phone without having a breakdown, respectfully. The Breadtube groups don't like me because I'm too insensitive, edgy, and irreverent, and they're all, the soft boy awoo types. So not so much there. There's some leeway in some communities, and there are people I'm on like semi terms with, but at the very least, there are plenty of detractors there. Hassan and I, he probably doesn't like me that much. His mod team hates me, and there's his community doesn't like me because all of my fans get insta banned from his chat for saying anything positive about me. Um, I think I have a little bit of sway in some center-leaning communities. I mean, I've had some severe criticisms um, for Shiwan Head recently, but there is still a lot of overlap between her community and mine. Though hers is larger than mine, so it would be more, it'd be a slanted overlap. But it definitely exists. There are some other people who I think I get along with decently, but it's kind of difficult to say. I'm too controversial for any community to be completely okay with me, which means that most content creators will avoid being publicly friendly with me to avoid alienating that small group within their community who really doesn't like me. It only takes one active person out of 100 in a community to really slant the community perspective. Like, if you can imagine a live stream, right now I've got how many people watching right now? 6,500. If 1 in 1,000 people here, just six, we'll just round down and say six, started posting enthusiastically in the chat about how I shouldn't talk with you because you're a child molester and they know your name and you're going to use the clout from this convo to molest children. That's not happening, to be clear. But if it did happen, six people saying that, you
Mhm.
better believe that would be noteworthy to every single person watching. They'd see that in chat. They'd see that in the comments. That would be all it would take. People would, notice would be drawn. So because I have a fervent group of anti-fans, they're usually capable of skewing communities against me. I shouldn't complain. I'm clearly doing well for myself. Everything's, for the most part, worked out pretty well in my favor, and I'm clearly popular in spite of all that. Um, but it is definitely a little bit of an impediment with the growth. Um, there's not much you can really do about that in the long run, outside of like do the best you can and then keep doing the best you can. And I mean, that's what we should all be doing anyway. So keep at it.
Mhm. Then that's a fun soundbite to exist now on the internet for me. Um, so then, okay, so quickly then, are these all these conflicts? Just not getting along, having conflict with everyone. Is it predominantly because of personality issues or rhetoric issues, or is it a political disagreement?
I think it's personality for the most part. I don't. Well, man, it's tough to say. I think it's mostly personality. The problem is a lot of the criticisms that I get politically are empirically incorrect in the sense that they will accuse me of being things I'm not or say that I'm not things that I am. In that case, I don't know where to count that because I feel like in that case, my personality is leading them to think I have different politics than I do. Or maybe more accurately, their perception of my personality causes them to associate certain political views with me, which just aren't true. I think there's a lot of overlap between the two because bad assessments of a personality will lead people to be less charitable when it comes to politics as well. Like for example, if you can imagine two people making the same joke, right? Where let's say they're watching they're doing a live stream Let's React content. They're watching a video of some other streamer having a breakdown or whatever. It's a lady. She says something irrational as we are wont to do, and then the video ends, and you have a left-leaning and a right-leaning content creator, and they're both like, women, and then they do like a little laugh. I think a lot of people, on the left would be willing to assume for the left-leaning content creator that it's a tongue-in-cheek joke making like fun of low IQ dismissals of women's perspectives based on their gender. Whereas with the right leaning person, I wouldn't be charitable to them at all. I would just assume they were doing the thing that the left leaning person was making fun of. So, in that respect, your assessment of a person's personality can affect what politics you ascribe to them when they say stuff. So yeah, a lot of overlap there. Really hard to separate it.
Mhm. So then, okay. So moving on to the online left, you were actually a a good creator for me to reach out to, or one I wanted to reach out to a lot, because you are possibly the most cognizant of the online left, in that you are analyzing it and critiquing it, or was kind of cognizant of its existence as a coherent or semi-coherent thing. Um, so simply to begin, how would you define the online left?
I don't know. I don't know if you could really define a space that big. I mean, it all depends on the site they're on, really, the social media space they're occupying. I mean, online left, it really depends on where you draw the line. If by online left you mean like socialist and upward, it's a pretty small group. If you're including like social democrats, the kind of people who are very like actively and enthusiastically promote like unionization, they're not like laissez-faire liberals. It's a much larger group. I guess like the Bernie crat would be because I would include Bernie crats in the online left, right? That makes sense to me. Um, there are more like resist lib types, like MSNBC lib types, or you might have someone like a David Pakman who is very against Republicans and Republican politics. But I don't think David Pakman's like a Bernie bro or like a like a radically or militantly pro labor. If you would include him as part of the online left, I think that you would have like a pretty huge chunk, the huge portion of people who produce any kind of political content online. And if you include people like Curtis Connor, who I mentioned before, who don't explicitly talk politics, but are probably themselves very left leaning, who sort of let that infuse the videos they make, then it's possible that the online left would be larger than the online right, depending on where you want to draw the boundaries. I don't really have a hard line on where the boundary should be put, um,
Mhm.
because I guess I should say that I actively oppose putting that line down. I think that the
Mhm.
online left can be used in a sort of general nebulous way. But if you try to use it in a very specific like delineation, like well, people are on this side or that side, I think that can be a bit awkward for people who just barely don't make the cut. And I don't want to cut them out. I want people. My goal would be like the online left shouldn't just be like a politics thing, right? If you believe in
Mhm.
very basic stuff, if you believe in like weekends, if you believe in like reasonable work hours, equitable distribution of wealth, if you believe in happiness, truth, justice, hope, then the left should have space for you. Even if you don't agree with every bit of the program, I think there should be room to accept, maybe we're not all socialists here, right? But we have broader problems to deal with. And if we can work together on those, then maybe at least for now, we're part of the online left.
Okay, so then you mentioned a lot of different types of people and groups and ideologies and all those things. Um, some of which are kind of the general left, others are the online left explicitly, or more so explicitly. Um, exactly what makes a distinction between someone who is on the left versus someone who is on the or within the online left?
Well, when I think online left, I don't just think of people who use the internet because that's everyone these days. I
Mhm.
think of people who are, they don't even have to be of the internet generations, like millennials or younger. It's more like the internet is the primary vector through which they make these changes. It should be noted, by the way, that the line between conservative and online conservative is at this point almost non existent. The right is really effective at synthesizing its old school content production and propagandizing with newer mediums, and the left, relatively speaking, isn't. I guess to put it another way, I don't believe that Joe Biden has ever made a Google search in his life, whereas I fully believe that Trump name searches himself on Twitter with an alt account every single day. Um, and extrapolate that out as far as you want to, really. There's a much more aggressive weaponization of the internet as a like a as a medium for reaching people by the right. This is changing to an extent, but I do think this means there's a stronger boundary between people on the left and people like the online left. I see people on the right sometimes where like you take someone like the Hodge twins or whatever, these two conservative creators, they're idiots, like incredibly stupid people. But everything about them gives me like pre-internet vibes. Like everything about them makes me think that they're not even on the internet. They have some like not Donkey's a good guy, like podunk TV show. Somebody makes a lot of money off of them by following them around with a camera, but somehow they're online. Whereas with the online left, I feel like the people who are really online left are like really, really online in a way that the people who are in the non-online left aren't. I guess I should say that the online left has the best shit posters by far. These people live on the internet. A lot of them are trans because trans people live on the internet. Um, and the right has no good shit posters really, and that's because to a lot of them, they're just sort of culturally regressive, or maybe they're just not very bright, but they use the internet effectively to spread their message. But they never come across that online to me. I don't know, the very online trope, apart from Silicon Valley types, doesn't feel like it comes up that often in the right. Whereas on the left, it's like all of them and all of us and me, you know.
Mhm. I have a general theory about that for this project. Mostly that the for leftists is not a lot of spaces, especially compared to the right in the real world. So you kind of go to the internet to fill that void. So then, is the distinction for the online left people who use online spaces as a tool and are present on them, or is it people whose politics and elements of their identity and or personality are based on online spaces or come from online spaces?
I mean, I think it's a bit of both. There's no hard taxonomy here, and I don't think anyone could do any hard taxonomy here. Um, I do have a higher standard when it comes to like the online left as a concept, though. I guess I feel like this sounds incredibly cringy, but I don't really know how else to phrase it. I feel like somebody who's on the online left, you should be able to kind of meme with a little bit. Like there should be enough of a familiarity with the internet, its terminology, its cultural iconography, and its history that you can have the kind of conversation that would be sort of weird and off-putting in person, or at the like you wouldn't talk this way to like your grandma or a grocery store clerk, but you can talk with them because they're familiar enough with the shared cultural space that they have an understanding of what you're talking about. That's not the case with a lot of the online right? Like you talk to Dennis Prager, who or Ben Shapiro, like you can't like these are just suits who use the internet, if that makes any sense. Like they're not shit posters. The internet to them, it's the same way. It's the difference between like people who thought of the internet as a creative tool and people who thought of the internet as an investment vehicle back in the late 90s, you know? Like it's the same space, but there are people who treat it with the sort of dignity and reverence of like a new and unique medium, and people who see it as a something they can leverage, or something they can put money down on. And that I think is ultimately the difference. The online online dash group should have some kind of cultural aptitude for it. I think that's how I think of it, at least.
Mhm. Well, I can say now actually. That's roughly how I am defining it. This is a bit of brief aside, and then a couple more questions.
Mhm.
We'll go through fast. But it's kind of looking at, I'm defining it as based on community of practice in anthropological terms. So, as you mentioned, kind of being able to meme a bit, that's to do with registers, which is a socially, bless you,
Oh yeah.
which is a socially socially specific form of speech. So if you think of like legalese for lawyers, if two people are speaking legalese, they recognize each other as lawyers, but they have to be in those circles with that education to know those words. That is the case of the online left. If you go to the average person and talk about, oh, what's who are the red fash and what's being red pilled and who are normies, they'll think what the fuck are you talking about? Um, However, you talk to someone else and they recognize all those things, there you go. You have a shared community of practice, and that collectively binds people together based on a shared knowledge and excludes those who have a deficit of knowledge. That is how I define the online left. It's political, yes. However, it's a lot to do with the spaces in which you interact and how that defines your identity.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's agreeable. Yeah. What something that's interesting as well is that when it comes to that terminology and iconography, there's one place where you're not going to find it that much, and that's the largest social media space, which is YouTube. Um, Leftists who are on Twitter, who have been on 4chan, who have been on Tumblr, who are on TikTok, there are lexicons specific to those mediums. Those sites have like unique left cultures to them. YouTube, interestingly, doesn't. I don't think YouTube has much of a shared language in general because it's so naturally centralized, where people comment underneath YouTube videos, but there it's always secondary to the video itself. Whereas with all the other mediums, there's sort of a more democratized, you know, um, Maybe not for TikToks. TikToks, you still respond to the TikToks, but I don't know. Do you understand? Do you get the feeling that YouTube doesn't really have a shared culture the way these other social media sites do? I can think of a person who seems TikTok pilled, Tumblr pilled, Twitter pilled, 4chan pilled. I can't think of somebody who comes across as YouTube pilled, except for maybe those like horror stories of people who their children start saying make sure to like and subscribe before they fall asleep because they watch so many YouTubers that that's what they think goodbye means. Like outside of those possibly not real horror stories, I don't know if I can think of any like YouTube broadly, like YouTube as a site, not just any particular creator. um does Facebook have any? I don't know. Well, left-leaning people don't use Facebook, so
There are specific, there are certain vocabulary specific to each platform. However, there's also, this is the other element of this, which is you and other creators. You kind of are the disseminators of these lexicons, of these ideas. I mean, there are people who I'll say this, there are people who have found your videos and through you have learned this terminology, the values, the good, the bad, the right, the wrong, how to operate within these online spaces, and then went forth into them uh, with your influence. So I don't think it's necessarily YouTube which is relevant. Rather, YouTube is perhaps the ultimate kind of content creation platform when it comes to the online left, in that it is all based on consuming other people's content, as opposed to something like Reddit, where you
yeah.
have a lot more freedom to kind of navigate your own, create your own arguments and opinions and navigate other people's.
This feels much less group oriented on YouTube specifically. I think of people being part of a YouTuber's community, but that doesn't really happen on Twitter. No one on Twitter is like affected by the specific cultural discourse of one single Twitter user. They're in like broader spaces. Like there are people on left Twitter, Breadtube Twitter, Annie Twitter, whatever. Um, but that's a space. That's a community, not just like one single creator. Anyway, I don't really know. I mean, people in my community are specifically affected by the lexicon and culture of my channel, but that's a me thing, not just a YouTube thing.
I think you'd be surprised to how well other people can recognize, this specific lexicon you discuss, simply because it's kind of an element of this specific online community. And the deeper in you get to it, the more of these nuances you recognize. I've spoken with other creators who are much more kind of, democratic socialists who are not as online, and they are far less familiar with the specific details and nuances and complexities of you or other creators, of terminology, and of kind of drama, as opposed to other people. And I've spoken to people who also are quite deep into this, and they know all these things. So
Well, I forgive them.
it's all quite interconnected in fun ways, and TikTok is actually quite separate. Okay, so that aside, two final questions. So we know we have little time left. So then, okay, I know that you say factionalism and purity testing are very big problems with the online left. Yes.
Yes.
Um, can you briefly share your opinions, or kind of what you believe, what kind of factionalism is occurring, and what kind of purity testing is occurring, and why?
Well, the purity testing is relatively easy, I think. There's just a lot of cultural capital to be had in being very performatively self-critical and being the one to call out problems in other people. The people use it as a way of sort of generating clout. I think the left also has an innate suspicion of people in positions of power. A large YouTuber doesn't have power in like an institutional sense, but in a social sense, they have a ton of power. And I think that a lot of lefties are just kind of naturally inclined to be suspicious of those types, which isn't necessarily wrong. I think that instinct is fine, but it can often lead people to be sort of like mindlessly antagonistic or derisive, Um, like I remember quite a few times ContraPoints has had certain sections of Twitter try to cancel her or attack her, sometimes being really ruthless too. I mean, like really going after her life. For total inanities, just for absolute nonsense. for stuff, not only stuff that isn't problematic, but like stuff that in left-leaning spaces you could just say it'd be fine. It's just the internet. There's always someone who's going to be mad and rile other people up. And again, if you're seen as the person who's pointing the finger outward, you're not having the finger pointed at you, and it's a common human issue. But I think it's worsened in areas that it's worsened in communities that have a very high opinion of their ability to identify other people's moral failings. You see the same thing in religious communities. I loathe to make the comparison, but if you go on, if you go on and see how like religious communities talk about other people's perceived failings, they tend to be highly judgmental. I mean, Christians are very judgmental. Their whole religion is based on this to a large extent. And that's because, they all feel like they have a divine handbook to objectively correct moral behavior. Lefties do too. Obviously, I don't think lefties are quite that dogmatic, but at times they make an effort to approximate it. Um, and as for the factionalism, this is just a very common left issue. I mean, this goes back literal centuries. Everybody on the left has their own roadmap to revolution. Everybody on the left has a very particular idea of the way in which they want to improve the world. And, there's one path backwards and a million paths forward. People who are progressive in nature tend to be much more likely to split and fragment. This has happened with actual leftist governments. It's happened all over the world. It's happened in the USSR, in China, in Spain, in Germany. It happens all the time. One of my prescribed solutions to this is to not focus on the long-term goals. You know, it's kind of like trying to find a life partner. If you're trying to find somebody you want to settle down with, there are some basic elements of the future that you want to work out, right? Do you want kids? Do you want pets? Do you want to live in a city or in a rural area? Do you want to I was going to say indoctrinate like a Reddit atheist. Do you want to raise our kids religious? So on and so forth. These are questions you might want to get an answer to. They're pretty important. But imagine like increasingly refined degrees of specificity. Like, oh yeah, are you the type of person who showers in the morning or night? Oh, okay. Are you the type of person who likes to do their grocery shopping in a big trip once every 2 weeks, or do you want to do it every like 3 days, or what? Like, if the more questions you ask about the future to determine compatibility and long-term goals, the more likely you are to never find a person who seems like they'll be the right one for you. And the reason for that, obviously, is because when you already live with somebody and do love someone, compromise and negotiation are the ways you navigate these differences in opinion. A lot of lefties don't do this. They lay out their 57-point plan from the start, and if somebody has a different 57-point plan, even by 1 or 2 points, then that is a different ideology with different material conditions and a different set of advocates. Does that make sense? I think it's better to just focus on the 1, 2, or 3 immediate big points, and you work out the littler details as you get to there. I mean, we're nowhere near communism. Why argue over the like distribution system or policing system of an ideology that doesn't exist at the moment? Like, we're 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 dealing with fascism and liberal capitalism right now. We're so far off from that.
Hmm. So, do you have time for one last
I
question?
got time for one more.
Okay. It's kind of a vague, open question. I'm just kind of curious to see your answer. How do you conceive of yourself? How do you see yourself in this community, on the space? Just generally, how do you think of yourself?
Well, as a left-leaning person, but I think in the day to day, like my interactions with my community and the way that I handle those, I tend to think of myself more as a comedian and life advice guy, which is funny because I would not at all like advertise myself as either of those things. But in terms of like the way I interact with the community day to day, I don't think of myself as a newsman, even though covering news is a big part of what I do. But I do make a lot of jokes. I do think that's a good like element of the presentation. It brings people in, and I would do it anyway. I think it's fun to do that. And I feel like I give a lot of personal advice, either interpersonally to people in chat or broadly, just as a rote matter of, you know, I think you should do this if you can. Um, the politics is personal, and the personal is political, right? A lot of the issues we have are sort of broad projections of day-to-day struggles that we face. There was a lot of good writing on this from back in the the civil rights era days, and like the black experience in America, and like what can you say politically about a country based entirely on day-to-day interactions of like a black man in the South? And I think that's a good attitude to take. When we think of, well, why are there so many incels, so many people mad at women? Well, the answer to that question is rooted in billions of interpersonal, day-to-day interactions that happen between different people, um, between men and women, mostly, oftentimes also a lot of men and men online. But these things are rooted in like very basic social and emotional impulses. What makes people insecure? What drives people to pursue others? What's a good dating strategy, right? Like that, it seems trivial, right? But the question, how do I pick up chicks, is actually an incredibly fundamental, like, life shaping question that a lot of guys, straight guys or whatever, are going to have defining a part of their life. That's pretty fundamental, yeah. But it comes across as juvenile, um,
Mhm.
like the kind of person who would go online and talk about how to pick up chicks. We don't have strong positive cultural associations with that. We have pretty negative ones actually, which I think is a bit sad. It's not undeserved. A lot of people who go online and talk about how to pick up chicks are morally unenviable people, to say the least. But that's because they control the conversation on those particular topics. What I'm trying to get at here is that I think a lot of the bigger political issues that we talk about are really just extrapolations of individual emotional, social conditions we experience. And if you get really good at addressing those at their root, you not only get better at understanding the broader political issues, which is critical, but you get better at understanding how to talk to people about them, you know? Um, God knows that the ineptitude a lot of third wave feminists have spoken on male dating, like the ineptitude with which they've spoken on that has contributed to a lot of social problems. That trope, like the feminist who, like if a guy ever says they have trouble finding a woman or dating or whatever, like there's this screechy feminist who will go like, oh, well, maybe you should treat them better. Or, oh, it's because you're acting this way or not. There are some feminists who act like this. I don't think they're in the majority, but the ones that do are indicating like an analytical failure, right? They're not they don't perceive of the political and the personal as being synthesized. They can only imagine that those personal questions are a reflection of negative political stances. They don't understand there's a reciprocity there, that people can have those questions be rebuked by what they perceive to be the left, or even imagine being rebuked by what they perceive to be the left, and that could inform their political stance. So that
Mhm.
recognition has to be sort of worked towards.
Okay, well, phenomenal, man. Thank you so much for this. Also, chat, thank you for not being cruel to me.
They were
That is all
they
my
were
questions
watching.
in our time. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them right now. I know we don't have much time, but
Give it a go, chat.
feel
Can
free to
we
ask
be
for
mean now?
sure, but yeah, please don't.
Okay, there's your answer, chat.
If you're gonna be mean, make it creative.
How was your day?
My day is fine. I just got back from finals period, so I'm home and relaxing.
Fun. How do we find more of your stuff?
Um, if I had stuff, I'd share it. I don't. I'm hoping to maybe publish this thesis in a journal later on, since it is a topic that's actually never been discussed before in any academic environment. Um, However, as of now, I ain't got nothing
All right. Thoughts on milk?
on milk.
Yes.
Let's see. I don't drink milk alone because that's for weird people. Whole milk is the only milk you can drink with protein shakes, um, and coffee and hot chocolate. Skim milk is not milk, it's gross water, and Europeans do milk better than Americans.
Let's see. What's your favorite color?
I like orange. Oh, the 70s, I like orange. And green, I like nature.
Interesting. Let's see. Favorite Billy Joel song?
I'm a New Yorker, so let's see. I can say I want to say Piano Man's cliched, but The Stranger is his best album. Piano Man album is kind of lame.
Okay. Do you like roguelike video games?
I don't know. I don't know roguelike video games.
Okay. Blue cells seething over green chads. Agree or disagree?
I don't know.
Who did you want to win in the World Cup?
Great question. I was initially Team USA because I'm only patriotic every 2 years. Then I was Team any anti Netherlands, and then I was Team Morocco because I had to go back to my African roots. Uh, uh, Argentina because fuck the French.
Fair.
But keep that a secret.
Fair reasoning. What is your field of study?
Anthropology and Hispanic studies. Specifically for anthropology, it is political rhetoric and contemporary media.
Gotcha, gotcha. Hold on. I'm seeing. I'm ignoring all the people with real questions.
You can ask those too. I'm happy to share.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm just choosing not to.
Okay.
Let me see. Fuck the Dutch. Lenin was cringe. Opinion on Guilty Gear. Um, do you watch Amphibia? Sleeping with the television on.
Do I want the television on? Oh God, no.
Yeah, that's
I'm a civilized
an
person.
accidental thing. Yeah, who even watches TV anymore?
I mostly watch YouTube and streaming.
Thoughts on Germa?
Germa. I don't know Germa.
Okay. Uh,
I'm online. I'm not super on. I'm online enough to know a fair amount of this, write a paper on it, but not enough where it's I don't touch grass.
that's okay. You're healthier than most of the people in here. Oh wait, in 3 minutes I have another person to talk to. How much of your anthro major is history based?
So for in general or for the paper. So in general, it depends. I look at a lot of. I do not look at historical anthropology. Other people do. I look at more contemporary culture. However, for this paper, I'm looking at a little bit of leftist history, particularly to do with ideological infighting, as well as history of the cyber left, and that is how the left utilized online spaces and tools for their purposes. So it's a little bit, not a lot. I do love history. I was going to be a history minor. However, in my school, you cannot do two majors and a minor. So,
Gotcha. Okay. I think that about tracks it.
okay.
If you want to argue with anyone else, then you'll have to go to the YouTube comments when this inevitably gets uploaded to the Vaush pit. Thank you very
Let's
much
go.
for hopping on.
Yep. Also, I'll say real quickly,
Mhm.
I sent you an informed consent form, which guarantees your right to privacy and your rights as an interviewee. So to be able to actually discuss anything that was said here, that has to be signed.
Oh, you mean like I have to download a PDF, scrawl my signature on it, then re-upload the image to you?
Yes,
Can I
this
give you
is
permission to forge my signature?
no, especially since you now publicly said that.
Can you?
There
Okay.
is some.
What if you didn't forge my signature while acknowledging that my signature will look like anything, but it will, but don't sign it, but it will look like anything.
There's my school's board might be on my case depending
Okay.
on.
I'll try to remember. Just send me one email a day reminding me until I actually do it, okay?
Okay, phenomenal. And I'll get all of chat to pester you too. Chat for me, please. Pester him.
Yeah, thank you. All right. I
Thank-
hope they're not going to know when I've done it. They're going to keep pestering me for weeks. Okay. Um,
Phenomenal.
thank you very much. I had a
Yep.
wonderful time talking to you.
Thank you as well. You have my contact information, so if any more questions you have for me, I'm happy to answer.
Take care.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Bye. Let me pee and then He did great, good interview. Oh, that was a great interview. Yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. That was fun. That was well structured. Okay, let me pee. Then we're talking. Okay. Excuse me, we're having another convo. I really like this shirt. It's really nice. Oh. Artemy's been with us the whole damn stream. Look at him. Look at this. Look at this little guy. Look at his little head. Ooh.